The room was thick with tension. All eyes were locked on the confrontation unfolding at the center. Standing before President Donald Trump was Elon Musk, tech magnate and global icon, who had just announced a strategic partnership with an African nation. But the bigger shock was the man beside Musk, legendary filmmaker Steven Spielberg. "You're betraying America, Elon," Trump roared, his voice shaking with fury. "Partnering with an African leader who once humiliated me, and now you've dragged Spielberg into this media circus." Musk remained composed. "I'm not betraying anyone, Donald. I'm choosing the future, and the future doesn't belong to those obsessed with past power." Steven Spielberg stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Mr. President, sometimes a filmmaker can see the shape of history before a politician does. I'm supporting a story that inspires the world, not a tantrum driven by ego." Trump slammed his fist on the table. "You're all delusional." And that was the moment the world understood a single phone call from Elon Musk to Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, had ignited a global diplomatic crisis. What began as a conversation about sustainable development and mutual respect had exploded into a confrontation revealing a stark divide in worldview. On one side, visionaries pursuing equitable partnerships. On the other, defenders of an outdated model rooted in dominance and control. This video will take you deep into a crisis unlike any before, where three global symbols collide: a president, a tech entrepreneur, and a master storyteller. Who is truly shaping the future and who is afraid of it? It was a quiet May morning in Ouagadougou. The city had not yet awakened to the significance of what was about to unfold. Inside the presidential residence, Ibrahim Traoré, the 35-year-old president of Burkina Faso, was reviewing agricultural reform proposals when his encrypted line rang a direct call from Austin, Texas. "This is Elon Musk," the voice said, unmistakably clear. "President Traoré, I've been closely following your transformative leadership. I believe there's a unique opportunity for a strategic partnership between us." Traoré paused. It was not every day that one of the world's most influential entrepreneurs called a West African leader directly. Musk's reputation as a visionary preceded him, but this direct interest in Burkina Faso was unexpected. "I'm honored by your call, Mr. Musk. What kind of partnership are you envisioning, Elon?" "Please," Musk replied with genuine warmth. "I see immense potential in Burkina Faso. Your country is on the path to becoming a technological beacon for Africa. I want to help accelerate that. Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink. We can all contribute to infrastructure, energy, independence, and education." Traoré smiled slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Musk, we've seen many foreign proposals, but often the benefits bypass our people. Why Burkina Faso?" "Why now? Because you're building something rare," Musk answered without hesitation. "A prosperous, sovereign, tech-forward African nation. That's the future I want to support, not exploit." The two spoke for 47 minutes, covering everything from universal internet via Starlink to building solar factories in the Sahel. Musk's tone was not one of a businessman seeking profit, but of a partner envisioning legacy. "Can I visit next week?" Musk asked. "You're welcome anytime," Traoré responded. "But I must be clear, any partnership must put the Burkina people first, not foreign shareholders." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Musk said. "That's exactly why I'm calling you." Neither man knew that their conversation had been intercepted by the National Security Agency, and within hours, a red-flagged transcript would land on President Trump's desk, triggering a geopolitical backlash no one had anticipated. The sun hadn't fully risen over Washington when the National Security Agency flagged the call. Encrypted, international, and far too significant to ignore, Elon Musk, the world's most influential entrepreneur, was on the line with Ibrahim Traoré, the young, defiant president of Burkina Faso. At 6:47 a.m., NSA Director General Paul Nakasone burst into the West Wing with a classified dossier. He didn't bother knocking. He stormed into the Oval Office, where Donald Trump sat still in his robe, leafing through the Wall Street Journal. Mr. President Nakasone began, breath short. We have a problem. Trump looked up, visibly annoyed. This better be worth interrupting my quiet time. It is. We intercepted a 47-minute secure call between Elon Musk and President Ibrahim Traoré. They're discussing a full-scale strategic alliance, tech infrastructure, energy education, and potentially dual-use aerospace technology via SpaceX. Trump dropped the paper. What the hell did you just say? Musk is negotiating with Traoré to deploy Starlink across Burkina Faso, install solar factories via Tesla, and even discuss launching African satellites through SpaceX. Trump stood up, veins pulsing at his temple. With that kid, the African dictator who humiliated me on live television. Sir Traoré is now viewed internationally as a reformer, Nakasone corrected. He's stabilized Burkina Faso, implemented democratic reforms, and holds an 87% approval rating domestically. Trump's face flushed crimson. That's fake. That's liberal propaganda. He stormed toward the Situation Room. Call an emergency cabinet meeting, now. Musk is going rogue. By 8:15 a.m., the Situation Room buzzed with high alert. Intelligence officers, military advisors, and cabinet secretaries filled the room. Trump entered last, furious and unpredictable. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice low and cold. We have a traitor. Slides appeared on screen, transcripts, Starlink coverage maps, potential solar plant blueprints. At the center, Elon Musk and President Ibrahim Traoré shaking hands, mocked up from leaked satellite imagery. Trump pounded the table. He's giving American tech to a regime that's anti-American. Sir, said National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Burkina Faso is technically an ally in counter-terrorism operations. Technically, Trump interrupted. Traoré called me a colonialist dog on international TV, but he has not taken anti-U.S. action, Defense Secretary replied cautiously. In fact, he's invited U.S. companies to invest alongside Musk. I don't care, Trump roared. This is personal. I gave Elon everything: government contracts, media praise, space launches. And he stabs me in the back for some desert kid trying to play world leader. Steven Mnuchin raised a finger. Sir, punishing Musk could destabilize the markets. Tesla's stock is tied to federal subsidies. SpaceX is integral to NASA. I built. Musk, Trump snapped. And I can break him. The room fell silent. Everyone understood this wasn't strategy anymore. It was vengeance. By 10 a.m., Elon Musk was summoned to the White House. He walked into the Oval Office alone. No lawyers, no aides. Just Elon, confident, calculating, unreadable. Trump was waiting, arms crossed. Elon, he said, smiling like a man with a knife behind his back. I hear you've made some new friends. Musk didn't sit. If you mean President Traoré, yes. We're exploring partnerships. Partnerships, Trump mocked. With an African dictator. A kid who came to power in a military coup. Musk didn't flinch. Traoré's reforms are internationally recognized. Burkina Faso is a model for clean tech development. Bullshit, Trump shouted, slamming his fist. You're handing over American space tech to a country nobody even knew existed before I mentioned it. Musk raised an eyebrow. With respect, Donald, your worldview is outdated. Traoré isn't the past, he's the future. Trump leaned forward. Let me be clear. You either cancel all dealings with Traoré or I cancel you. Every contract, every subsidy, gone. Musk stared silent for a beat. Is that a threat? No, Trump growled. It's a promise. There was a long pause. Then Musk spoke quietly, but with steel in his voice. You don't scare me, Donald. You don't own innovation. You don't own me. Trump exploded. I made you. No, Musk said, turning toward the door. You tolerated me. There's a difference. Trump's voice cracked like thunder. If you walk out that door, we're done. Musk paused at the threshold. Donald, we were done the moment you started using America like a weapon. And then he left. What followed was silence. Deafening, dangerous silence. Because the war had just begun. Elon Musk had barely left the White House before his phone lit up. 5 missed calls from Austin, 3 urgent texts from his legal team. But it was a message from Ibrahim Traoré that caught his attention. Trump will escalate. Are you ready for what's next? Musk replied with one word, always. By the time he returned to Texas, the internet had already begun buzzing. Rumors of a closed-door shouting match between Trump and Musk had leaked, fueled by aides who couldn't contain what they had just witnessed. CNN reported a historic rupture between the president and America's most influential entrepreneur. Fox News called it the most public betrayal of Trump's presidency, but Elon Musk wasn't done. At exactly 5:00 p.m., he posted a tweet that shattered the diplomatic silence, proud to announce strategic partnerships between my companies and the Republic of Burkina Faso, led by visionary President Ibrahim Traoré. The future of African innovation starts now. In less than an hour, the tweet amassed over 2.3 million likes, was translated into 27 languages, and trended at #1 globally. Analysts didn't even need confirmation. It was obvious Elon Musk had defied the most powerful man in America and chosen a young African president as his partner in the 21st century tech frontier. The blow to Trump was immediate and devastating. He exploded on Twitter at 6:01 a.m. The next day, Elon Musk is betraying America by partnering with a corrupt African dictator. After all my administration has done for Tesla and SpaceX, this is the thanks I get. The backlash was swift. Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, responded within hours. The president cannot use economic threats against private citizens for engaging in legal international business. Even Republicans hesitated to defend Trump. Senator Mitt Romney issued a biting statement. Entrepreneurs like Elon Musk represent American leadership on the world stage. Attacking him for his global partnerships is un-American. But what Trump didn't expect was the cultural earthquake that followed. Steven Spielberg released a short video the same day. Standing in front of a simple black backdrop, the iconic director spoke directly to the camera. Stories shape civilizations. What Elon and President Traoré are doing isn't just business, it's a story the world needs. A story of mutual respect, global cooperation, and technological hope. That's why I stand with them. Spielberg's post racked up over 40 million views in 12 hours. Then came Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk has every right to do business wherever innovation thrives. America should support, not sabotage, visionary entrepreneurship. Tim Cook, Reed Hastings, and even Barack Obama weighed in. Obama's tweet broke records, proud to see American business leaders building bridges with visionary African partners. This is 21st century diplomacy. Trump's fury turned into desperation. By day 3, an emergency press conference was called. Trump stood before a wall of American flags, flanked by senior officials, many of whom looked visibly uncomfortable. I will not allow American technology to be used by anti-American regimes, he declared. We are reviewing all contracts with SpaceX and Tesla immediately. But instead of intimidating Musk, the move galvanized global opinion. At the African Union, 54 nations signed a joint statement condemning Trump's interference. President Traoré and Mr. Musk have every right to form international partnerships. We will not tolerate neo-colonial intimidation tactics. The European Union echoed similar concerns. France's Emmanuel Macron spoke first. Visionary collaboration between entrepreneurs and rising African leaders should be celebrated, not politicized. Canada's Justin Trudeau followed. This partnership represents the future clean energy, connectivity, education. We support it. Even Britain, usually cautious, issued a veiled critique. The UK supports the rights of private businesses to pursue innovation wherever it leads. Behind closed doors, Trump fumed. They're all turning on me. Spielberg, Obama, the whole damn planet. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows tried to reason with him. Sir, escalating this will only make Musk more powerful. He's becoming a global symbol of defiance. Trump cut him off. Then we destroy the symbol. At that very moment, a new wave began to rise, the Musk-Traoré effect. Investors flooded Burkina Faso with inquiries. Tech firms in Ghana and Kenya reached out for similar partnerships. University students across Africa launched hashtags, Build with Musk, Wash Africa Innovates, I Stand with Traoré. CNN ran a segment titled From Obscurity to Icon, How Trump Accidentally Made Ibrahim Traoré a Global Star. Musk, for his part, was unmoved by threats. Instead, he doubled down. In a live-streamed event from his Austin headquarters, he announced Burkina Faso will receive full Starlink access for all public schools and hospitals by year's end. This is just the beginning. Together we will build the future. Ibrahim Traoré appeared via satellite. Calm, composed, and dignified, he addressed a world that was suddenly listening. Partnerships based on mutual respect bring prosperity. This is not a project of charity. This is dignity through technology. And for the first time in decades, the world saw a different Africa, not one asking for help, but one offering innovation. As the cameras faded out, analysts whispered what few dared say publicly: Trump may have started a war. But Musk and Traoré just launched a revolution. The storm had broken, but the aftershocks were just beginning. Within a week of Elon Musk's public announcement and the international backlash against Donald Trump's threats, the tectonic plates of global diplomacy began to shift. What started as a private phone call between a tech mogul and a young African president had now escalated into the most significant diplomatic realignment of the decade. At the United Nations, ambassadors buzzed with urgency. Several African nations called for an emergency session to condemn economic blackmail against sovereign partnerships. The language was forceful, but what startled the world was the standing ovation that greeted Ibrahim Traoré as he entered the UN Assembly Hall. Wearing a simple navy suit and no entourage, Traoré walked with the calm authority of a man who had just rewritten the rules of global power. His speech was short-measured, but every word echoed like thunder. 6 months ago, we received a phone call, not one of domination, but one of partnership. My people do not need pity, we need access. Access to technology, to opportunity, and to respect. He paused. The world is not divided between the powerful and the powerless anymore. It is divided between those who build and those who bully. A roar of applause. Cameras captured diplomats from Asia, Latin America, and Europe rising to their feet. Even representatives from countries traditionally allied with the U.S. stood to applaud. Something fundamental had shifted. And back in Washington, Donald Trump watched in silence. His approval ratings had cratered. His own advisors were leaking stories to the press describing him as obsessed, irrational paranoid. The Washington Post editorial board called the incident Trump's Waterloo. Even the Wall Street Journal, once a loyal defender, ran the headline, Trump made Burkina Faso famous, but Musk made it matter. The White House communications team was in chaos. Every tweet from Trump only deepened the crisis. When he posted Ibrahim Traoré is a fraud. Elon is being used by corrupt Africans. Sad. The response was volcanic. Trevor Noah mocked it on The Daily Show. You know you messed up when the guy who invented electric cars is more popular in Africa than the guy who tried to build a wall. But it wasn't just comedy. Harvard, Oxford, and Sciences Po announced a joint symposium titled Musk and Traoré, a New Model for Global Leadership. Stanford invited Traoré to keynote their summit on decolonizing innovation. The World Bank revised its forecast for Burkina Faso's GDP, projecting a staggering 34% growth within the year, driven by Musk's infrastructure investments. And then came the cultural wave. Netflix greenlit a documentary executive produced by none other than Steven Spielberg. The title, Wired for Dignity, The Musk-Traoré Revolution. Spielberg was already deep in production, flying his team to Ouagadougou to film what he called a 21st century turning point. He told Variety, "This isn't just about geopolitics, it's about narrative control. about who gets to define progress and who gets erased from history. In response, Trump attempted to launch a counter-documentary with a conservative media group. It was titled The Betrayal of America, but it flopped. Only 2.7 million views on YouTube, compared to Spielberg's trailer, which garnered over 40 million in the first 48 hours. Meanwhile, on the ground in Burkina Faso, change was no longer theoretical. Over 12,000 jobs were created through the Tesla solar factory in Ouagadougou. Every public school in the country was now connected to high-speed Starlink internet. Women-led tech cooperatives were forming across rural regions, supported by Musk Foundation grants. For many Burkinabe, this wasn't just a win, it was a redefinition of possibility. A young student interviewed by Al Jazeera said, "For the first time, we're not just watching the future, we're building it." And the ripple effect spread fast. Kenya announced negotiations with Neuralink to bring cognitive learning centers to Nairobi. Ghana signed a memorandum of understanding for a joint AI research hub with XAI. Namibia, Rwanda, and Senegal followed, eager to be part of the techno-national bloc, a phrase now coined by The Economist. Across the Atlantic, Elon Musk became something Trump had always craved, a global statesman. In a rare video address, Musk summarized it best: technology is not neutral. It either empowers or excludes. With leaders like Ibrahim, we choose empowerment. And yet not everyone celebrated. Inside the Pentagon, classified memos circulated on geotech realignment scenarios. Old guard lobbyists warned of Africa slipping out of Western control. Defense analysts quietly asked, what happens when innovation no longer needs the West? But those questions came too late. The world had already pivoted. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as geopolitically irrelevant, was now the epicenter of a new global model. One where cooperation trumped coercion and innovation flowed from places the West once ignored. Trump's legacy, meanwhile, lay in shambles. The House Oversight Committee announced an investigation into potential abuse of executive power to target private enterprise. Leaks confirmed internal memos urging the NSA to monitor Musk's movements, fueling fears of domestic surveillance abuse. As impeachment whispers began to circulate, even Trump's inner circle grew quiet. Jared Kushner was reportedly distancing himself. Melania had stopped appearing in public altogether, and Elon, he didn't bother replying anymore. The final blow came 6 months later at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Ibrahim Traoré took the main stage. Let this be clear. Africa does not need saviors, it needs partners. The age of manipulation is over. The age of dignity has begun. As he walked off stage to thunderous applause, one journalist summed it up. Trump tried to stop a partnership. He started a movement instead. 6 months after the Oval Office confrontation, the geopolitical landscape had been irreversibly altered. What had begun as a phone call between two men, one in a dusty capital in West Africa, the other in the heart of Silicon Valley, had become a paradigm shift in global power and narrative. At the United Nations General Assembly, a silence fell over the chamber as Ibrahim Traoré approached the podium. This time, there were no whispers of uncertainty, no doubts about his legitimacy. Traoré had become something far larger than a regional leader. He was now a global symbol of sovereignty, innovation, and dignity. He began simply. 6 months ago, a sitting president of a global superpower tried to block our partnership. He failed. Not because we were stronger, but because we were principled. He looked around the room of 193 delegations. We did not respond with threats. We responded with action. We did not attack reputations. We built schools. We powered hospitals. We connected villages. And we inspired the next generation. A standing ovation thundered through the hall. Across the world, screens lit up with breaking news banners. Traoré's speech marks new era for Africa. Back in the United States, the atmosphere was starkly different. Donald Trump was now under formal congressional investigation for abuse of power. The hearings revealed a campaign of pressure against federal agencies to revoke Musk's contracts. Text messages showed Trump attempting to blacklist African leaders who had spoken out in favor of Traoré. Even longtime loyalists were jumping ship. Rupert Murdoch's media empire shifted tone, describing Trump's actions as desperate and damaging to America's global standing. Trump's impeachment approval ratings surged past 60%. He had not only lost control, he had become the very thing he had once mocked, a failed statesman isolated and consumed by personal vendettas. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's legacy was transforming. No longer just the man who launched rockets and sold electric cars. Musk was now viewed as a tech diplomat, a builder of new alliances in the most unlikely places. His keynote at the G20 was titled Enterprise as Foreign Policy. He spoke without notes. What we build reflects what we believe. When governments hesitate, entrepreneurs must act. When politics divides, innovation unites. That's the future I'm investing in. At the same summit world, leaders lined up to shake Ibrahim Traoré's hand. Germany's chancellor called him a visionary. Japan pledged $300 million to co-invest in African tech projects. The African Union announced the formation of a Pan-African Technology Fund, seeded by contributions from Musk Bezos and Alibaba founder Jack Ma. Burkina Faso was now exporting technology, solar batteries, AI software, low-cost satellite designs to other African countries. A small country once synonymous with instability had become a tech hub for the global South. The irony could not have been more poetic. Donald Trump, once hailed as the architect of America First, had inadvertently sparked a movement that redefined what first meant, not dominance, but innovation, not isolation, but inclusion. In a CNN interview, Musk reflected on the turning point. When Trump threatened me, it clarified something. If building bridges makes me an enemy, then we need better definitions of patriotism. The interview went viral. Students in Lagos chanted his words. Tech hubs in Accra painted murals of Musk and Traoré beneath the phrase, "Build, don't bow." And then came the film. Steven Spielberg's Wired for Dignity premiered simultaneously in Los Angeles, Paris, and Ouagadougou. It wasn't just a documentary, it was a cinematic retelling of how two men born on opposite ends of the world changed the rules of diplomacy, business, and media. Critics called it Spielberg's most important film since Schindler's List. Audiences wept during scenes of Burkina Faso children watching Starlink-powered classrooms come alive for the first time. The closing scene, a drone shot of the Tesla solar factory in Ouagadougou, with the sun rising behind it and Traoré and Musk walking side by side through the compound. No words, just music. The message was clear. The story had been written, and it didn't belong to the past, it belonged to the future. It is a word often overused in politics, but rarely earned. Yet in this story, legacy wasn't just about individuals, it was about systems reimagined. Economic legacy: Burkina Faso's GDP had doubled. Unemployment had fallen by 38%. Hundreds of startups were emerging in rural towns, once thought unreachable. Diplomatic legacy: Africa was no longer seen as a passive recipient of aid, but as a laboratory of innovation. Countries from South America to Southeast Asia looked to Traoré's model of tech sovereignty, narrative legacy. Perhaps the most lasting change. The idea that a country needed Western approval to be relevant had been shattered. A filmmaker, a tech titan, and a young president had rewritten the global storyline. And for the millions of young people watching from around the world, a new idea had taken root. You don't need to come from power to create it. You don't need permission to build something better. But behind the global fanfare, something quieter and perhaps even more profound was unfolding. In the village of Bobo Dioulasso, far from the limelight of Ouagadougou or Davos, a group of young girls gathered beneath the shade of a neem tree. Their school had only recently been connected to Starlink, and today was their first live science class with a professor from MIT. As the screen flickered to life, their eyes widened, not just at the technology, but at the realization that knowledge once locked behind oceans, and privilege now flowed directly to them. One of the girls, a Sata, would later say in an interview, "When I saw the stars through a telescope that Elon Musk helped send, I realized they weren't just for others to name. We could name them too." It was this shift, not in policy, but in self-perception, that defined the deeper revolution. Across the continent, this awakening took many forms. In Senegal, musicians composed ballads to the Dignity Alliance. In Nigeria, a group of robotics students named their new drone prototype Traoré. In South Africa, university professors began updating syllabi to include African-led technological revolutions, not as footnotes, but as foundations. Meanwhile, in the boardrooms of old empires, unease grew. London, Paris, and Washington all began convening internal think tanks. Not to address how to suppress the movement, those days were over, but to figure out how to remain relevant within it. The IMF, often criticized for imposing austerity in Africa, quietly began drafting new investment frameworks that emphasized partnership over debt dependency. The power had shifted, and the question was no longer who would permit Africa to lead, but how others might catch up. Back in the U.S., former President Trump, now increasingly isolated, watched the world move on without him. His legal battles consumed headlines. His social media rants grew erratic. But the world no longer flinched. They had found new voices to follow, voices not of power imposed, but of purpose chosen. Elon Musk, now more symbolic than corporate, became something of a cultural diplomat. When asked why he risked everything to stand by Traoré, his answer was simple: because I saw a better future and I wanted to be part of it. As for Traoré, he remained grounded. He refused private jets, insisted on modest presidential housing, and made unannounced visits to rural clinics and schools. His popularity didn't rest on charisma alone, but on consistency. He did not build temples to himself. He built infrastructure. He built dignity. And that perhaps was the greatest shift of all. For decades, dignity had been a word thrown around in speeches, but rarely rooted in policy. Now it was visible in fiber optic cables laid across deserts, in solar panels installed on tin roofs, in broadband access for a grandmother teaching local history via tablet. This was the revolution Trump never saw coming, not one of banners or bullets, but of bandwidth and belief. By year's end, the African Union declared the Musk-Traoré partnership a blueprint for future continental development. A new department was created, the Office for Technological Sovereignty. Its mandate to ensure Africa never again waits to be invited to the future, but writes its own invitations. Because in the end, what changed the world wasn't a policy memo or a scandal. It was a phone call. It was a handshake. It was the choice to build when others only knew how to block. And from that choice, a continent rose. Thousands of miles away, in a high-rise co-working space in São Paulo, Brazil, a group of young Latin American entrepreneurs gathered for a startup weekend. The theme was technological independence through collaboration. The keynote speaker, a software engineer from Burkina Faso, invited not because of his country's GDP, but because his open-source AI library had just been adopted by universities in 6 countries. "No one expected us to lead," he said, "and that's exactly why we did." From Colombia to Cambodia, a quiet reconfiguration was underway. Young innovators no longer measured relevance by proximity to Silicon Valley or Beijing, but by alignment with the new ethos, purpose, sovereignty, and decentralization. Musk and Traoré had not just built infrastructure, they had built a mental model, and the world was downloading it fast. In Europe, this ripple was felt differently. Youth leaders in Spain launched a campaign called Tech for All, citing the Musk-Traoré model as proof that ethical innovation could coexist with profit. In Germany, engineering schools rewrote final year project guidelines to include social dignity metrics. and in Poland an unlikely alliance between farmers and coders pushed for solar-powered smart agriculture, a direct emulation of Burkina Faso's new agricultural data network. Even in China, quietly but unmistakably shifts occurred. Analysts at a state-backed think tank published a rare public paper praising the Burkina Faso model for achieving influence without coercion. It was not lost on global observers that for a country with historically low geopolitical leverage to now shape the policy conversations of superpowers, something fundamental had cracked open. Meanwhile, the cultural tide surged forward. African artists began painting murals that transcended protests. They celebrated possibility. In Accra, a 3-story depiction of Traoré with circuitry patterns woven into his traditional dress became a viral symbol of digital indigeneity. In Johannesburg, poets recited verses about reclaiming the skies, not through warplanes, but satellites built in African labs. In the US, this transformation ignited a long overdue reckoning. At Stanford and MIT, African Studies departments collaborated with computer science faculties for the first time in decades, hosting seminars titled Coding Beyond Borders Lessons from Burkina Faso. In Harlem, New York, a new tech incubator was founded by African American investors called Next Narrative Labs, its first funding round, aimed entirely at startups from the Sahel. What had started as a geopolitical dispute was now something richer, an ideological migration, from fear-based foreign policy to opportunity-based global design. And Ibrahim Traoré, he kept moving. On a quiet day in late spring, he visited a remote village where his father had once farmed. He didn't bring press or security, just a notebook. He sat with elders beneath the same baobab tree he'd known as a child and listened. About climate shifts, about water tables, about dreams for their grandchildren. When one elder asked him what he'd say if Trump ever apologized, Traoré smiled. History already answered him, and it had. Because the true power of legacy isn't found in monuments or headlines, but in the quiet places where transformation takes root, grows slowly, and cannot be uprooted. By year's end, a final gesture came full circle. A school in Bobo Dioulasso, the same one where Aissata had first seen the stars, was renamed École de la Dignité Numérique, the School of Digital Dignity. Its motto painted in bold letters over the entrance gate: "Our future is not imported, we write it ourselves." Not long after the renaming of École de la Dignité Numérique, something unexpected began to stir in North Africa. In Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, student unions long fragmented by political infighting found common ground for the first time in a generation. But this time, their cause wasn't protest, it was construction. Under the banner Build Forward, they launched a regional tech exchange program modeled after Burkina Faso's Starlink accelerated curriculum. Thousands of students enrolled. Young coders from Tunis spent their summers in Ouagadougou learning solar battery optimization. Moroccan data scientists collaborated with Burkinabe farmers to refine climate models. A new axis of knowledge, horizontal cooperative Pan-African, was forming before the world's eyes. But the impact didn't stop at youth. Inside the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, seasoned diplomats debated an idea that would have seemed radical just a year prior: a continental charter of tech sovereignty. Proposed by a joint delegation from Burkina Faso, Rwanda, and Namibia, the charter aimed